one of the things we're trying to look at is how could we possibly help people, whether it's not for profit or part of our recruitment business, but these kids, I should call them, because some of them are 15, 16, right through to A levels, through to degree graduates and beyond. How on earth do you demonstrate you've got work experience when the only thing you can do is work from home, work remotely, be on Zoom? Because it's obviously an understandable risk for certain businesses that might have said, come and work with us for a couple of weeks or 6 weeks or 3 months, whatever it might be. They're probably not going to do that as much, certainly for the foreseeable. Certainly last year they weren't doing.
Yeah, it's not so much work experience, but there's a government program called Kickstart. Part of the impetus for that is it's almost to subsidise opportunities for kids who might be facing long-term unemployment. And again, there has to be a certain amount of hand-holding. There has to be a different way of working. But let's not forget, we're doing that. We're professionals. You guys work in the areas you do. We work from home. There's thousands of people out there who don't. In many ways, I've heard it being characterized. It's now the difference between working class and middle class. As a university, we also train lots of healthcare professionals. There's no hiding place. If you work in a hospital, a GP practice, a local clinic, or if you work in social care, you've got to rise to the challenge there. And there are opportunities, and people are looking all the time for people to fill those roles. A lot of people have been volunteering as well for the charitable third sector, and that's where a lot of people can get their experience from, isn't it?
Yeah, of course, and absolutely vital at the present, and a lot of opportunities to do so. And what about taking it on from? Okay, so volunteering is a fabulous idea. What about people who need that mentoring? I remember put myself back as a 21-year-old, which is far too many years ago, but I look at really how employable I was, and I thought I was really employable at that age. But actually, the amount of mentoring I required, the amount of training, the amount of development, where do you see that going over the next year or two, or is that literally a case of just waiting for that to almost get back to normal?
I think it's a real problem right now, actually. I don't know if you can also remember your university years. It was that one-to-one relationship that you may have had with tutors. That's where universities and that's where academic staff have had to work really, really hard. And I'm full of admiration for those who've managed to pull this off. It's the one thing I think that students are probably missing out on, is that moment that maybe at the end of a class or a seminar, it just says, can you just give me a few more tips on reading this or to solve this problem? My youngest son's at a specialist college doing music technology. And we've had to encourage him and cajole him. And we had our parents' evening yesterday with his tutors, that they don't feel that they've necessarily got a one-to-one relationship with him, because most of it's been conducted in this kind of environment. We've got the benefit of us. We're mates. We know each other. We've done other things together. Students starting out don't have that. They haven't been able to pick up on that relationship and then transfer it into a new environment. Their source is building that relationship in this really strange and artificial two-dimensional way, not being able to read body language, to take part in Zoom calls where you can't quite read the room. And it's hard for the academic staff, for the tutors, the teachers as well. There's so much going on within our university, but many of the same themes have emerged. So there's people in our university, in our careers and employability team, they want to reach out to employers to say, we're open for business, students are looking for opportunities, come and work with us, come and engage on the courses, because that's where the relationships work best. If someone's coming in, doing a guest lecture, taking students on work placements, helping to solve their own problems and study them, maybe do research projects on them, using agile ways of delivering education through our apprenticeships, they're all good. That's us, thinking about the future, thinking about how higher education needs to be delivered, as you guys have both communicated.
From my experience in the startup world, Manchester Entrepreneurs is a really engaged, proactive, do lots of events to get sponsorship. They run programs and everything. And it's, when I saw those students when I was out of student world and in startup world, I thought, wow, imagine I knew about that at uni. That would have been amazing. I'd love to have been part of that. How many societies have maybe disappeared, or how engaged are they? How are they coping?
For my sins, one of the other projects I'm involved in is projecting the university's policy research into the outside world. And I'm working with a bunch of guys from a Manchester student think tank. So these are students who want to think about policy solutions, and they've come together both from Salford, University of Manchester, and from Manchester Met. And again, we're having conversations like this one where they're putting on virtual events. They've got about 100 students signed up who really want to start putting their minds to good use, using this time and this space that they've got to think about new solutions for tricky times. So yeah, hopefully there is stuff going on.
Good to hear. And you'd like to think as well, temporary, in terms of people not physically being there, and even though you would argue lesser important, but I still think they're important, like the sports societies and the social ones.
That's what I mean, yeah.
I feel so sorry for a student who's gone and not experienced all of that, knitted around their actual reason for being there. Because I think for me personally, I probably got as much out of that kind of thing as I did the actual education. So it's so important.
We've done some stuff with schools and universities in this, and like I'm volunteering with Young Enterprise still, and like absolute every bit of empathy for the teachers in this situation, because that first session I joined, and this is with a really good, really engaged school and class, and you can see how exhausting it is for the teachers to that half an hour session. They're doing that 8 hours a day. Do you think this will change the way we look at university and education as a whole? Something that opened my eyes when I was finishing uni was like where my mates were getting jobs, because we graduated in 08, 07 when the world went belly up last time, and it was a nightmare. Trying to get work was horrendous. And my mates who maybe had like a good degree from a good uni, they could do like a history degree at Manchester or Edinburgh or somewhere like that, would go and then work in finance or recruitment. I was like, what the how's that work? You've done a history degree. What's that got to do with finance? I just think it might change like fundamentally the way people approach uni in a starting point, especially if this is going to, depending on how long this goes on for, at least restricted version of it, missing out on that social side. And also then just the relevance going, why am I going to, like, actually more considered, why are they going to uni? I actually think that'll help the universities as well. Like, are they going to be more considered going, we really need to have more centre, more focus on that?
That's always been very embedded in the culture of our university, but it's also about rooting it very much to the needs of an economy. Now, you think about a city like Manchester, we're probably along with the University of Manchester, we are definitely in the top 5 of most applied to universities. Now, right. I'd love to claim that that's because of our wonderful track record and all the rest of it, but it's also because Manchester's got a certain magnetism to it. But the point I'm making is, as a university, we have to be embedded in the local economy, and to be tuned in with what's going on and where there are opportunities in different sectors. Now, we're recording this in the middle of January. At some point in the next week or so, the government are going to be announcing that they're going to be moving parts of Whitehall, for instance, to different parts of the north of England. Move the Treasury to Bradford or whatever, as part of this whole agenda of levelling up. You'll know this better than anyone, Richard, because this is your world of knowing what employment trends there are, knowing what sectors require different sorts of skills. But our university has to be really agile to that. Now, I think for everything I've waffled on about for the last couple of minutes suggests that we are meant to do all those things. I think we've got to get much sharper on it. And I'm sure that the other universities in Greater Manchester are as well. Can I ask you guys a question? There's something that's been just been not eating away at me, but I've been thinking about recently. And I went to visit Google in 2012, and they were talking about something that they do called 20% time, where they allow their staff almost permission to do other things, to do creative projects.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was editorial director at Insider, some of my colleagues were horrified that there'd be staff bolting out the door at 5:30. What are they doing? What is this younger generation? Oh, they're all work shy. They just want to go down the pub. They're not doing anything. You scratch a bit more, and I can think directly of the individuals. We had stand-up comedians. We had people who were running club nights, very entrepreneurial. I mean, by day, they'd be designers or ad salespeople or subscription salespeople, but they all had other things going on. And they sort of did it in their own time. And yet you have to give people that outlet for their other projects. I've started DJing in the last few months. Yeah. I've got a program on Tameside Radio with my mate Neil called Music Therapy. This isn't a plug for it, but it's given me an outlet.
Completely agree. Chaining someone to a desk 9 till 5 is not productive. You need distractions, you need headspace, you need your own outlets. We've got a philosophy. Obviously, we're a startup, so we've sort of got the luxury of having that. We do have to work daft hours. At the same time, there's a reason I get to the lakes as and when I can and go on fresh walks as and when I can, because that for me is my. I've often joked I'll do more work on a day in the hills than I will do at a desk, because that's where I get my headspace to think things through, solve problems, create ideas, and that only comes from not being chained to some. There is definitely times you have to be doing hours at a desk or something because you've got to get through a piece of work or put something together. But doing that like 9 to 5 for me, into like from my old experience at the bank, it isn't productive. You just don't do as much actually. And our philosophy is that we have just have deadlines. It's like, right, we've got to get this done and we want to do it by then. So we do whatever that takes. It's not a case of we have to do, you're clocking in and clocking out and keeping an eye on each other. And there's some horrific things coming out of this actually from the world of, this remote world where, like spyware, where people are checking that they're logging into the computer and, they actually can see that they're at their desk and stuff like that. And it's rightly been lambasted in the press. And I think actually now is this situation we're all in has shown just how much that is the case, that we need those outlets, we need those extra bits of space.
I'm with you all the way. And I think we tried quite a few different ways of really good flexible working. And the reality of flexible work is you want somebody to enjoy that flexibility. You want the freedom, the positives that come out of it. But sometimes there's a give back as well, that you need the flexibility that they are going to work late or work early. Well, I love the fact that now, like you say, Mitch, you've lost the commute. So in my personal case, I've gained the best part of a working day of time. So how an employee or me or anybody uses that is huge. You might spot things a lot quicker. So actually, we've seen some projects move on at lightning pace because of the fact that we're all having to sort of zone in and then go away and do it. And other things that we thought, we got to the question of why are we doing this a lot quicker than I think we would have done had we had a lot of time together in the office, sat in a boardroom, done some creative planning. So I think it's got so many positives, and this asynchronous communication, which I don't think we've mastered it yet, but I think we're certainly better than we were, which is actually some things don't need a meeting. I don't need somebody to be in the office at a certain time to discuss that. This is just information sharing. So actually, it's allowed us to expand our business into better locations, bigger locations, but it's actually made us work harder as well and be a lot sharper at what we do. So.
Yeah, we're speaking today on the inauguration of Joe Biden. We've seen the end of the Trump era. Again, not wanting to completely politicize the discussion, but we've also seen in the last year, the Me Too movement. We've seen a much greater awareness of diversity. I work with an amazing woman called Mammy Maguire, the head of social media at the university, and she wrote this profoundly moving essay at the height of the Black Lives Matter movement last year after George Floyd was murdered in the US. And it made so many of us think really, as I said, profoundly about our own privilege, about our own the way we see the world, the way people look at us when we walk in a shop. We're three white guys, we walk in a cafe or a shop, or I've seen you on TV in Altrincham Market, Mitch. But how does it feel to be a black woman in those situations? How does it feel to be a black family, a mixed family walking on the hills of the Lake District? How do people react to you when you, in all those circumstances? We realize how easy actually a lot of our life is, and how does that then impact the world of work? And I think there's a reckoning and an awakening that the intolerance, the alpha male culture, it was on its way out and it's absolutely gone now. I mean, it's slightly counterintuitive, as I said, three white guys talking about this, but there is a big change and a reckoning. We see it here in Greater Manchester with big business personalities who, they had it too good too long, getting away with terrible practices and awful internal cultures. That's got to end.
Now the time to stop having intentions and policies and actually having actions. We had one of these conversations, absolutely fantastic conversation with Vim. She's absolute champion of this, absolute leader in it.
So I have to thank you guys actually for putting Vim on this podcast, because I listened to that, I watched it, and coincidentally that shortly afterwards I got a call from someone involved in producing a conference in West North. And I just said, you need different voices on it. And I suggested Vim, and she's on the panel. It makes people think differently, and it confronts people the way that they've always worked. It's not good enough. It's basically not good enough anymore. Thanks for doing that, because it was a great podcast.
And also, so it made me learn that there's so much work still to be done about how people hire, and actually, you know, inclusion is progressing nicely, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be, and it really needs a massive push from everybody. And ironically, like you say, we are three white guys, and I won't say middle aged because it's a bit harsh on Mitch, but we are of that stereotype. But I think genuine progress has been made, and certainly, you know, 20 years ago, I was working in a firm where, you know, perhaps the culture was great in some ways, but in a lot of ways it was aggressive and it was alpha male and all that kind of thing. And I think the change that I've seen, and you know, I've got two girls that are going to go into the working world, you know, between probably 6 to 10 years from now, and it made me wake up. And I'll be honest, I was probably slow to learn, but I think the speed at which you can change is huge, which is to make sure that actually we have to be a lot more proactive, and we are the, if you like, the problem. We are the people that has to make that change.
Well, at least somebody's written a history book about that era.
Brilliant. So it's funny you said about being political, because for those who don't know, Michael obviously ran for MP not too long ago. What would you like to see done differently from a political perspective?
I'd like to think that when the government speak the language of levelling up and going to these hard to reach places, the ones that elected a Conservative MP for the first time in 2019, places like Bolton and those towns in the northeast that were always Labour, red wall towns, they say they're going to do something for them. What I think we've seen with the fall of Trump, you know, he appealed to those people and he said, I'm going to make your lives better. My great worry is they won't. So what then? Who do they then blame? And that's my biggest concern. We're out of Europe. That everybody was sold, and I'm going to be overtly political. They were sold a pup on Brexit. It was said it was going to make people's lives better. We were going to take back control. Back control of what? You know, the fishing industry. It's already had a kick in the balls already as a result of Brexit. And supposedly we had Nigel Farage throwing fish in the Thames, saying that the fishing industry was being destroyed by being members of the EU. Actually, the opposite's the case. So I do worry about that. And where the big challenge then comes is what it is that we practically, positively do. And do we meaningfully devolve power to the regions? We've had the worrying example recently of something called, you know, it's a bureaucratic construct called Transport for the North. It's been scrapped. You know, we were meant to be getting extra platforms at Piccadilly Station to ease that bottleneck. It's not happened. We're still waiting for all those things. It's action, not words. And when it boils down to it, the big standoff between the government and our mayor in October, which I was 100% in support of what he was saying, was about support for places in the north, and particularly that distinction between people not in our position, but people who are on minimum wage. They're the ones who are most vulnerable to unemployment. They're the ones who are most vulnerable to poverty. And it's taken a footballer from your team, Mitch, Marcus Rashford, to have brought to the nation's attention the plight of people who are in extreme poverty and what they're suffering, and the precariousness of their employment. Not necessarily the people who you'll be placing in jobs, Richard, but people who are working in the care sector, who are stacking shelves in supermarkets. And my goodness me, I think supermarket workers have really, you know, they're the unheralded heroes. They're the ones who we maybe should have gone out and clapped on our doorsteps as well on a Thursday night.
Completely agree.
You know, there's a whole package of challenges in there. I'm not politically engaged or active anymore. I've got an opinion just like you guys have. I don't have any particular special insights, but I just think we've got to mean it when we say we're going to do things like level up, make society more equal, give people proper opportunities. We've got to match it, as you said, Mitch, with action, not words. That happens at political macro level. It happens in our businesses and our organisations with the decisions that we take.
I completely agree. And if I could change one thing this year, and I'm sure it'll take a lot longer, is removing the labels and the stigma that come with things. You know, do you have to be a Tory? Do you have to be a social? Do you have to be a communist? Do you have to be a liberal? Yeah, they've all got their own stigmas. Actually, there are people with great opportunity plenty of cash, doing well, thanks very much, who could be helping people who are not in that position, as you say.
I agree. I think we almost saw some of that at the start of the pandemic. I think where the problems have occurred, of where it has got political. It's where, you know, they've then given contracts to mates and things, and they've not gone for it's. And I get that they've got an impossible job, but you know, even the opposition, are they doing enough to take them to task on these things? I don't think they are. The argument with Andy Burnham, it showed that devolution is just a nice thing to say rather than actually. He didn't have any power. You know, if he had any power, he would have just said devolution. We don't know. There's our budget. That's us done. He had to ask the government for it, and then got his hand slapped. Yeah, I agree. I'd love to see like sort of barriers getting broken down between labels and everything. But I just don't know if it will ever happen.
No, I think there's a moment. We're in a moment now, aren't we? The passing of the Trump era. Some of the things he said are outrageous, and you just can't imagine any other politician saying those things and getting away with it again. We're in this. We've got to go through this process of healing.
It does feel good, though. I have to say, with Trump moving on, it's got to, the world does need America in a much more positive footing. I was looking forward to this, and I knew it'd be good fun, but it was even better than I expected. So, really appreciate your insights as well.
Just to clarify as well, just irrespective of what I'm wearing, we don't play sea shanties on Music Therapy on Radio.
You have to now.